There, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1990 science fiction thriller, Flatliners. Now, before we get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I would like to give a special shout out to Steven for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you'd like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Flatliners, to me personally, other than a few faults here and there, I think it's a fantastic film. I've always been a fan of this film. I remember checking it out on television when I was younger and being really captivated by it. And it's a film that I've always backed. I've always been in this film's corner. I think this film is really underrated. I know that it's got a cult following nowadays. I mean, the following was big enough that it wound up getting a remake in 2017, which sucks. But clearly, there was enough of a fan base that the studio thought that, okay, there might be something in making another one. So it's not like it's a film that's completely fallen in between the cracks over the years, but it is a movie that I still feel is underrated when it comes to its critical reputation. When the film came out, it got very mixed reviews. In fact, there were some reviews from some critics that were really harsh, and I think it's a lot better than they made it out to be. And other than some dated late 80s fashion and big hair, the themes and the subtext and the topics that this film addresses are timeless. They still are equally as thought-provoking today as they were back in 1990. Now, the film is directed by Joel Schumacher, and I think he did an absolutely spectacular job directing this film. I think this is a tour de force for him. I think this is honestly some of his best work as a filmmaker. This is Schumacher at his best, where he's given a project and just allowed to go wild with it and just be as innovative visually as he wants to possibly be with the project. And the results are astonishing. Like, this is a stunning looking film. Just from the opening of the movie, just showing the different statues and the different architecture of the campus, just from that alone, it's just a really jaw-dropping film. And then throughout the rest of the movie, there's just so many just absolutely astonishing and awe-inspiring shots in this film. And it's just a really trippy, wild, and fun film to watch, just to see what new technique or what new wild bit of camera work Schumacher has up his sleeve next. And Schumacher is also the reason why the film has Jan de Bont as the cinematographer, has the film's just unbelievably talented production designer Eugenio Zanetti, because Schumacher, as well as the producers of the film, they decided that we want to make this film as visually interesting and innovative as possible. So we are going to get people to join the production who can help us achieve that, because we don't want to just do the bare minimum with this movie. We want to create something that is unique. And they succeeded when it comes to that. Like, this is honestly one of the best looking films of the 90s. I honestly, truthfully, 100% stand by that. I really do feel that that's the case because of the combined efforts of everyone involved. And a big part of that is because of Joel Schumacher. Like, he was a visual master in his prime, and he does not get enough credit for that. I mean, the traveling camera work in this was ambitious and just really well done. The different techniques that he employed were very well handled and well thought out, and just had some really fine uh craftsmanship, and were very well tuned and timed to the emotion in a scene. He effectively was able to direct scenes that had a lot of tension and suspense and thrills visually, but also scenes that needed to be a little bit more mysterious or surreal, or scenes that needed to be a little bit more dramatic. Like, he just handled everything remarkably well from a directorial standpoint. Um, I love this film anyway, but a big reason why I like it so much is because of what Joel brings to the movie. Uh, the film also features a really good script by Peter Filardi. Peter Filardi, he went all out when it comes to his research for this film. The concept of the movie came to him after he heard about a near death experience from the perspective of one of his close friends. They told him about what they saw and what they were experiencing and how it made them feel, and in turn that made him think about how this could potentially be a interesting concept to utilize for a film. And so he got to work on the script, and he decided to you know, create a cast of characters who are in the medical field to make things all the more intriguing, and also to provide an extra sense of risk because they're medical students. They're putting their careers on the line to do this risky experimental work. And he also did deep dives on near death experiences. He didn't just go with what his friend told him. He did research and looked into different accounts of different people who experienced different kind of near death experiences. And as a result, it just makes for a very authentic and very realistic script, despite the science fiction elements of the film. And he just did such a great job in terms of the characters, and really providing them with a lot of motivation and distinct motivations when it comes to their involvement in the experiment, and also their bond with one another, and how unique that is when it comes to the different characters. The different characters have different bonds with one another. Some are closer than others. And I like that about it. And I also really like the fact that it made you think. It made you think about, okay, what if there is something to this theory of there being life after death? And what if uh, the place that you go to after you die, what if it's not as cut and dry? What if it's not as black and white as some religious texts or other people make it out to be? What if it's something more ephemeral? What if it's something more up in the air and up to interpretation? And also, what if you willingly put yourself into that kind of situation and commit suicide essentially, but you survive? What if you bring something back? And what if that's something that you bring back with you is your sins? And your sins are coming to life and they're haunting you. And in the case of Nelson, they're harming you physically and actually trying to kill you. And I think that's a horrifying concept if you think about it. Just the idea of your sins haunting you physically, like not just mentally, like actually physically haunting you. That's some pretty scary stuff. And also the idea that, what if the voices that are telling you that it's okay, that it's fine, it's time to go, what if those voices were wrong? What if those voices were like manipulative? What if those voices were not benign? What if there was something more sinister behind it? And so there's a lot of uh, questions and just really nice thoughts that pop in your mind while you're watching the movie that just make you think more about the themes and the concept and the context of the film in terms of the story, and it just makes it so much more involving and genuinely interesting. And I like the different encounters that these characters have with the sins of their past. I like that you have the stuff with Nelson and Billy, which is a really stark and really dynamic contrast to me. It's something that a lot of people don't like because they think it's silly and it's stupid. Like, a kid, really? A kid who's beating up on this grown man. But for me, I like it a lot because it's something different. It's something unique. And if you think about it, it's something that is particularly emasculating for a character like Nelson, or just anyone or any guy. Could be, any gal too. I mean, like, it's not just an emasculating sort of thing. It's just a humiliating thing for anyone to just get your ass handed to you by a little kid. And if you go and you say like, "Hey, uh, I've been getting attacked by this little kid," they'd be like, "Well, why aren't you able to defend yourself? It's a little kid. Like, what's your problem?" It's like, "Well, it's I can't actually hurt this kid because this kid doesn't actually exist. Like, this is my sins of the past. It's this kid that I accidentally killed when I was younger, and I was um immature, and I was a bully, and I threw a rock at this kid and caused him to fall off a tree, and he died, and now he's haunting me, and now he's physically hurting me." People would be like, "You're crazy. You're nuts." And that's something that is also really effective. It's just this whole, like, is it in your head or is it actually there? But yeah, I like that contrast. I like the idea of having this little kid in a hoodie just beating the ever loving crap out of Nelson, and him becoming more and more withdrawn and more terrified of this kid. Because that's something you normally wouldn't think would actually work, or you would ever think of. You're not going to think of like, "Oh, I'm going to be scared of this kid." It's kind of a similar thing that Pet Cemetery did with Gage, for instance, and I thought that worked in that film as well. Um, and just the other sins that the different characters encountered. Julia Roberts' character Rachel and her father. Like, some of the scenes with her character, like when she's doing her medical exam on an actual cadaver, and then she's having these visions that the cadaver that she's operating on is her father. Like, that is some really visceral, intense horror. And that whole angle with her was heartbreaking, because you find out that she's been dealing with this grief after all this time because her father committed suicide soon after she saw him in the bathroom, and she's been burying the truth and what she saw after all this time. And because of the near death experience, and because what happened after she flatlined, now she's having to face it. And the experience, it initially was very horrifying and grueling, but because of this, she's able to face her grief head on and let her father go. And she's able to see why her father did what he did and realize that it wasn't her fault. And I thought that was some really powerful and strong writing, and a great arc for her character. And David with this whole thing when he was bullying this girl at school, and the girl shows up again after he flatlines and then starts picking on him, and then he decides, I'm going to go and track this girl down and I'm going to apologize to her. And that's how the different characters start to realize how they might be able to face and might be able to stop this threat of their sins coming back to haunt them. Joe, he has been illegally recording these women that he's been dating without their permission, and so he starts seeing these women just appear in his daily life. It first starts out with these videotapes showing up on TV screens, and it's as if they're talking to him and telling him, why did you do this? And then they start actually appearing as like apparitions in his apartment and outside of his apartment when he's just walking around on the street, and they're hitting on him. And that is some really scary stuff too. It takes something that, if you think about it, might be kind of benign, might be something that isn't scary, isn't really that affecting, and turns it on its head and twists it in a way that is genuinely chilling. And I love that aspect of this film, and I love how it's structured when it comes to the script, because it doesn't really let up. Like, you have Nelson flatlining first, and then the other characters that compete with one another to see who's going to flatline next and who's going to flatline longer than the last. And it just leads to a lot of really, at least the first time around, unpredictable, genuinely compelling storytelling, because you're just glued to the screen because you're wondering, okay, are they going to survive this next flatline? And if they do, what is going to happen? Like, what are they going to see? What is going to come back to haunt them? And I also like that there's a character in Randy Steckel who, he doesn't even flatline. He doesn't even do that. So you have this guy who's kind of an outsider who doesn't do the experiment, but he's still there recording the events, and that enables him to have a different arc, because initially he's a skeptic. He thinks this is just ridiculous. What are we doing? But then after a certain point, he realizes that this is something that he could capitalize on. This is something that could make him famous, or this is something that he could have over the baby boomers. And it leads to some really great uh, uh, dialogue like this: Halloween morning, rotting pumpkins, burning leaves, black cats mating like rats in the alley. It was as if we felt no fear, as if we were already dead and had nothing to lose by dying. Or perhaps it was because we had lived life so well and loved life so much that we fancied ourselves immortal, overwhelming the powers that be with the force of our passion for science. Or maybe we were just fucked in the head. Like, I just love lines like that, and there's a fair amount of them with this screenplay. And I like the ultimate way that things resolve themselves in the end, for the most part. I think this stuff with Nelson and the kid, Billy, I think I got what they were trying to go for, but I thought it was a little too vague and not as clear as I think it could have been. Because there's this whole sort of thing where, okay, Billy is chasing after him, and Billy is hurting him. If he's alone, Billy attacks him. And Nelson feels that, okay, I have to go under in order to atone. Because a lot of what's happening at this point in the film is the characters that have flatlined, they are finding ways to atone for their sins, so their sins don't kill them. And so Billy is Nelson's sin that's come back to haunt him. And so he flatlines, goes under, and then it's as if he's just replacing Billy in the scenario where Billy was killed in the past, but this time it's a young Nelson. So he's being chased by Billy and these other people, and they're hitting him and throwing rocks, and climbs at the tree, and he says he's sorry, but Billy still throws a rock at him, and then he falls to his death. He goes from a kid to an adult and then crashes to the ground. And while this is all happening, his friends are trying to revive him, but I just don't know about the atonement. I don't know how he atoned for what he did. Was it just him saying I'm sorry in that particular context when he was a kid in this scenario, and he said I'm sorry before he got hit in the head with a rock and then fell? Like, I just don't get it, because before he's resurrected, he sees Billy one more time. Billy takes his hood off and then smiles and then walks into the light. And then I'm like, okay. And then Nelson, he goes back to the realm of the living, and then he tells David, today is not a good day to die, which is a reference to the opening line of the film, which I thought was really good too in terms of the writing. Starts out with this a line of dialogue from Nelson, today's a good day to die, then has an end cap where he says today is not a good day to die. And that's what makes me think, was the whole stuff with Billy just a way for him to appreciate life and living, and come to that conclusion that it's not a good day to die? Is that what it is? Because if that's what it was supposed to be, it's not as clear as it could have been. So I think that's one aspect of the script that I think is a little lacking and is not as strong as it could be. But other than that, I don't really have a whole lot else to say about the script when it comes to any sort of negatives, because I think the script is really good. It's got a great hook at the beginning in terms of this whole experiment that Nelson is going to take part in. The way that it introduces the characters is really strong. The way that the setting of the university is structured, the university and the different location that they're using to do the experiments, that becomes its own character in some ways. There's a fair amount of twists and turns when it comes to the story and what happens next. The the uh the backbone of the story is just consistently strong, because it's this whole journey of life after death and these medical students risking their careers and their lives to try to see uh, uh, from their own point of view with their own eyes what happens when you die. And there's also a good amount of humor at times in terms of lines of dialogue and some banter, so it's not something that's too serious and too pontificating or too pretentious. So it has a good balance of uh, light and dark in that regard. It's not too heavy. It's not too wordy. So it just makes for a one hell of a thrilling film, if you ask me. It in a multitude of different ways. Just a really thrilling, exciting, and captivating story that was just really well executed for the most part by Peter Filardi. And the cast is just awesome. A top-notch, terrific, just grand cast. Kiefer Sutherland as Nelson. I honestly think this is some of his best work, one of my favorite performances by him. Julia Roberts, it's one of my favorite performances from her as Rachel. I think this is honestly a really good performance by her. There's a lot of nuance to it, a lot of different layers. Really good performance. Kevin Bacon as David, another standout performance, one of my favorite Kevin Bacon performances. William Baldwin as Joe, he's fine. He's not as strong as the first three, but his character isn't really I would say the one that has like the biggest arc or the most screen time. So he's fine with what he's asked to be, and I think he was a good casting choice in terms of playing a guy who is just taking advantage of women, and it just has this sort of, I don't know if scummy is the right word, but he does have this sort of look and feel to him in this movie that he might be the kind of guy who would do a lot of one night stands with women and would just use them and record them illegally. Um, and Oliver Platt, I love his performance in this. This honestly might be my favorite role of his as Randy Steckel in this. Uh, he doesn't flatline or anything, but he almost steals the show in a lot of ways because he has some of the best dialogue, and he definitely has some of the more memorable comedic moments as well, and just was a nice balance to things when it comes to these characters and what they were going through. And the supporting cast is good too. Like Kimberly Scott is the older Winnie Hicks, Joshua Rudoy as Billy Mahoney, um, even someone like Hope Davis, Beth Grant, Patricia Belcher. Um, yeah, it's a really good cast. And I know a lot of marketing was kind of trying to ride the coattails of the Brat Pack, and even Kiefer Sutherland himself said in an interview that it's like the Brat Pack dies or Saint Elmo's funeral. And I'm like, that's honestly really accurate. But I kind of look at it more as like the Brat Pack meets the Twilight Zone. And I think this is honestly arguably the best Brat Pack kind of movie that came out after the Breakfast Club and those other Brat Pack films. I think this is honestly the best one that was trying to take a little bit of that and get a little bit of that success, because it just takes a different perspective and an angle with the sci-fi element and with a little bit of horror, and a hell of a lot of intrigue. And the cinematography by Jan de Bont, I mean, just a joy, a pure a joy to watch. Cinematic bliss. I love the look of this film. The way that he worked with Schumacher is just visually delectable. And Schumacher said it best himself when it comes to picking Jan de Bont and Eugenio Zanetti as the production designer. I told Eugenio and John that I wanted us all to take risks, to create our own world. This isn't a documentary, it's a fable and a fantasy, and in some ways a science fiction movie. So I wanted to surround it with a very visually exciting and interesting world. The intention to design sets and atmosphere that would symbolically represent man's internal struggle with death. And to invent this world, he worked with de Bont and Zanetti, and they worked together, put their minds together with one central goal, to make the film as visually exciting and interesting as possible. So they took a lot of different historical architectural styles, like Greek, Roman, Gothic, and Renaissance, and then used some really incredible and dramatic lighting to just make it pop off the screen in a way that is just jaw dropping. And they utilize some real sets and some real locations. I think they also might have created some stuff specifically for the film. I know it is one of those things where you're like, why are these medical students doing operations on cadavers in a Gothic cathedral? But it's still something that, to me, despite how kind of incredulous some of it might be if you think about it, it still works. It works so well because it just adds an extra element to the film that just makes it so much more compelling and so much more interesting to watch. So yeah, Jan de Bont, I cannot sing enough praises for his cinematography in this film. And the editing by Robert Brown is another thing that's worthy of singing praises. Like his editing is exemplary. It's excellent. It's on another level. It elevates the film to levels it wouldn't be without his work on it. I mean, there's so many scenes that are just edited in ways that are just so captivating visually. Like the different visions that the different characters have, they all have their unique editing styles. The way that these characters encounter their sins in reality also has its own kind of unique form of editing. It's just a ride. It's a rush of a film to watch because of just how it's edited, how it's directed, how it's shot by the cinematographer, how the production designer created a lot of other elements that they used for the film visually, how it's lit. Like the lighting in particular, I'm going to mention this again because it's something that I don't think gets enough uh uh hype. It's something that isn't talked about enough when it comes to films like this and movies in general when it comes to the importance of lighting to just create a certain mood and a certain atmosphere. And it's like 114 minutes, but I never thought there was a flat line. I didn't think it had a moment where it went flat. It just kept on going, and it was just a thrill. One of the best thrillers, if you ask me. It really is. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention James Newton Howard's score. I can't believe I almost forgot that. Like his score is another thing that just makes this film so awesome and so great and so epic in so many different ways, and it just makes the emotion from these different characters and what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, so much more visceral and so much more impactful. And I think it's one of his best scores, and it's a damn shame that it's not even officially available. Like, how is this score not officially released? Like that's a head scratcher. Another thing about the music, I also like the song by Dave Stewart, Party Town. I thought that was a fun track. Is it a song that really fits the tone of the film? Not so much, but it works well in the scene that it's in, and it's a fun song to listen to on its own. I love Flatliners, and I cannot recommend this enough. I really cannot if you haven't seen it yet. And even if you have seen it, it's been a while. I still recommend checking it out, and definitely check out this 4K. If you have a 4K player and a 4K setup, pick up this 4K from Arrow because this is amazing. Like this is the best the film has ever looked. It's got a brand new, at least for the time, 4K restoration. Looks absolutely gobsmacking, and you have all these other features. The features are okay. I'm not going to say that they're great, but they're good. They're interesting enough. But the biggest selling factor is the film itself, because this film is already on its own a movie that looks fantastic. But with the 4K restoration and Dolby Vision, it's a stunner. It really is. But anyway, yeah, I don't really know what else to say about Flatliners except to me it's a gem. It's honestly one of my favorites, and thanks for watching my review. And as always, I'll see you later. See ya.